The Bolivian government has put forward constitutional reforms that will greatly shift where the revenue from the natural resources goes and distribute it much more to the ordinary people of Bolivia and far less to the elites. These are fighting words and fighting policies. They're responding with their own kind of constitutional amendment that will try to block the enforcement of this constitution in their states. So you are headed for a collision. You said earlier that the elites are not used to fighting democratically, and if your government is committed to a democratic process, included in a democratic process includes enforcing laws, and sometimes with force. Democracy doesn't negate the use of force. Where is this headed? Do you think this can be settled in a constitutional democratic way? Or at some point, does the Bolivian army have to go in and enforce the law? And then if so, where does that lead?
Como usted dice, la democracia permite el uso legítimo de la fuerza por medio del Estado y de las leyes. Como antecedente, una reforma en Bolivia, una reforma principalmente económica de Bolivia, que fue en 1985, la reforma que fue la implementación del modelo neoliberal en Bolivia, it needed 3 estados de sitio en 3 años. This time, it's much more deeper, the change, and we didn't use not one time the martial law, because the purpose, the voluntad of the President Morales is to reach all these changes in a pacific and democratic way. The problem of the opposition is not only a problem of sabotage all the changes, make an obstruction of all this process. The problem is that they don't have an answer for Bolivia today. They don't have a proposal. I believe that they don't even know what Bolivia is today. They never imagined an indigenous Bolivia. If they could even see a bit of this reality, or they could have made the changes before, long before. But they didn't even notice this. They didn't want it to see it.
Do they have the support of the population in the lowlands? How does the popular opinion play out in their own areas?
In the lowlands, there are also indigenous people. A lot of indigenous people also. In Bolivia, most of the people, most of the population, they recognize themselves as indigenous people. In the last census, where it was a question about it, to ask if you recognize you are part of some culture of indigenous people, the 62% they answered that they feel they are part. That census, it was in 2001, in a moment where the indigenous identity, it was a negative identity. To call someone Indio, it was to say you're an animal. Today, if you make the question today with an indigenous president, most of the people, more than 80%, I'm sure of that, will recognize as indigenous, as being part of an indigenous culture. And that is in the lowlands, in the highlands. After the elections of December 2005, in the election para los asambleístas, el MAS ganó en Santa Cruz también los representantes para la Asamblea Constituyente. It was 2 votes at the same time. It was one, the referendum if the state wanted to be autonomous, and at the same time, the election for the Asamblea Constituyente. But at the same time, la voluntad de autonomía ganó en el departamento. The people didn't think that it was a contradiction to choose the people that were pushing the change and to be autonomous. This is very important because that shows you that it's not a problem of all the region. It's not an opposition to the change. It was just they wanted change also in their department.